Hello, Roosevelt families. Good afternoon. This is Mr. Wazo, and I thought today I would share with you a little bit more about our social emotional learning curriculum and some of the reasoning and research behind it to help you in your efforts to develop the growing children you work with these days. Second step is the curriculum we use across the district, and I'm hopeful that you have access to the resources that the Committee for Children who produces Second Steps to Learning have made available. I'll include the links to it in my letter to you this week. But growing resilience is really the main initiative behind our Second Steps curriculum. And resilience is particularly important in these times when there is a lot of free floating anxiety that's triggering some big emotions and difficulties with sleeping, handling stress, and learning. So I thought I would talk a little bit about empathy, compassion, some ideas like mirror neurons and externalization, and finish up with the application with an activity of these ideas. So I hope this is helpful to you today. So empathy is the overarching initiative around our, it's called affective education, teaching kids how to identify the emotional experiences they're having, to name the emotion and describe how it affects their body, where in their body it happens, and how it's expressed. And most importantly, maybe, is how to identify those feelings in other people through nonverbal cues like shoulders up or down, frowns, smiles, hand gestures, closed fists, open hands, breath. And there's sort of a stepwise progression that's why it's called Second Step, in the curriculum. And it begins with recognizing the feelings in yourself. What do they look like, feel like? Where in your body do you feel them? Being able to name the emotion and understand the strategies that you're developing to cope with big emotions, recognizing feelings in others, and how you can respond with understanding, which is compassion. I made a couple pictures for you as a sample of a feelings chart, which is one of the ways we teach young children feeling identification. Got disappointment, surprise, and I'm not sure you can read the word anger there because of my screen, but anger. And you can do this with children with lots of different approaches. There are feeling charts that are pre-made, that are just simple smiley faces and different expressions. I find it useful to take pictures of the kids. There's some research to support that in generalizing learning, it's more effective with using actual photographs of people rather than cartoons. But they work. It depends on what is fun and engaging for you and your child. To talk a little bit about mirror neurons, because this is somewhat new research. It started, I think, in the 90s with some experiments on where does the brain fire up when it's stimulated, and kind of accidentally folks found that your frontal lobe fires up first in response to a stimulus, and then sends information to the limbic system, and you have a physical response. And it's to things like the example I gave you here is if you pour a glass of water, someone seeing you do that will feel thirsty. And that's hardwired in us, and it's evidence that empathizing with another person's experience is part of who we are naturally as human beings, and we can amplify that pre-existing structure to support our emotional growth and development, and our ability to cope with stress and to engage positively in our world. Another example of that would be if kids will see other children running across the playground and someone might fall, and there's an automatic response, empathetic response of "oh no" or "ow" or "ah," and that's evidence of the mirror neurons at play and contributing to our ability to empathize and eventually have compassion and behave in a compassionate manner. The other idea I wanted to sort of set the stage with here is a term called externalization. And in the olden days of Sigmund Freud, externalization was sort of a byproduct of projection and neurosis. But these days, we have learned to appreciate that externalizing one's inner life is a very creative way to expand on our experience and to be able to communicate our experience to each other. And part of that is identifying feelings, naming them, and actively engaging with them. This contributes to our own self-development and their ability to gain control of our experience and make choices rather than being driven by our overwhelming internal response, particularly to stressful ideas and experiences. And it underlies virtually all of our learning processes through life. An example of that is storytelling. And I cannot think of any human endeavor that does not rely fundamentally on our ability to tell stories and be understood. We are social animals. We depend on our ability to communicate and be understood for our survival and for our thriving, our blossoming as amazing creatures that we are. From dance and music to poetry, math, science, everything involves a story. 1 + 1 = 2 is a math sentence. It's a form of communication in a language. And we use storytelling and the fact that externalizing as a psychological process is healing to manage stress. I'm going to show you one way that I do with working with children. In working with anxiety, and I chose that because I think that's pretty prevalent right now. Kids are having trouble falling asleep at night. They're struggling with just a lot of uncertainty, and they're responding to our stress as well and amplifying it. And the 3 steps I outline here: naming it, talking it out, and engaging. There's a pre-step that I forgot to put in there I want to mention, which is connecting. That when a child is in overwhelm, and that can look like being totally shut down all the way to full-blown outrage and tantruming. The first step in working with a child in distress is connection. And typically that would look like a simple touch and a calm presence in the face of the storm. And just knowing that another person is there with you in that distress calms it enough to then take that second step which I've labeled 1, which is to name it to tame it. And the idea there is that as soon as you can identify the feeling and use a word to describe it, you've engaged the frontal lobe, and it is pulling the child out of that limbic system storm and into their reasoning abilities. It's that first step towards managing and controlling big feelings. And if an adult can first connect, reassure, and name the emotion that they're seeing, the child can respond by saying, no, I don't feel that way, I feel this way. But as soon as they're using language in that way, you're that much closer to taming the storm. And once things have calmed a little bit, talking it out, asking questions that open the story. What's the first thing? Where do you feel in your body? And if it was a past experience, what time of day was it? Looking for details and context to expand the child's ability to tell their own story creates a beautiful array of neural connections that contribute to their ability to eventually tame their own big feelings and start managing their own responses and empowering them to be themselves. And the last part is very important, which is to creatively engage, to externalize that story, to draw a picture, write it down, write a story, make a cartoon, but in some way to bring that story into the world separate from the inside of the child, to get it out there, to look at it and interact with it, gives the child a sense of control again, and engages all the parts of our lives, in other words, our brains, in a creative process, which is innately empowering. And I gave you a picture of the pet worry monster, and I have my family's pet worry monster here, and this is Fred. Fred eats our worries. And I have a worry I'm going to feed him. And my worry is I worry about waking up in time for that early morning meeting. And so I wrote down, I worry that I will not wake up on time. And Fred, you are going to have this worry back from me. It's no longer mine, it's yours, and you can take care of it. Even though I set my alarm clock, I was still worried. But now that I've fed Fred and put it aside, I don't have to think about it as I'm trying to fall asleep. And hopefully I'll get a better night's sleep. And that's just one activity you can try. My advice is to follow your child's lead and help them find the way to creatively engage, externalize and engage with the situation, and find workarounds instead of having to hold anxiety, which is like a big cloud that can just overwhelm you, helping them manage it and overcome their feelings of being out of control. And lastly, I just want to remind you to have fun. That there's a lot of research to support that we learn so much better when we are having fun. We remember things much longer, much more effectively, and we feel better. So I encourage you all to continue to have fun. And I hope this is helpful, a little mini lesson in social emotional learning and managing anxiety. And I look forward to hearing your feedback on my efforts here. And I look forward to connecting with you each and all someday soon. So till then, be well.